The Philadelphia 76ers sit at 15-27 ahead of tonight's game against the number one seed in the East, the Cleveland Cavaliers. And as of right now, the Sixers are 4 games just out of the play-in spot. And barring any drastic changes, it looks like this team will not be headed to the NBA playoffs this season. And for a team that entered the year with not just playoff expectations, but championship expectations, expectations to compete with the Bucks, with the Knicks, with the Celtics in the Eastern Conference, after handing out a max contract to Paul George, after re-signing Joel Embiid to a contract extension, handing Tyrese Maxey a max contract extension as well, championship expectations were there for this Philadelphia 76ers team. And fair or not, with Joel Embiid being sidelined and most of this team being injured for a majority of the year, not really ever being at full strength, somebody is going to get the blame. Somebody is going to get fired more likely than not. And the finger's going to be pointed at, one, head coach Nick Nurse, or two, general manager, vice president of operations, whatever you want to call him, Daryl Morey. And as I said, fair or not, with Joel Embiid being the centerpiece of this roster, him not being in the lineup obviously is a big thing, a determining factor. Who knows if he'll ever be good enough to be able to play again at a full level. He might be able to play 3 games here, 4 games there, then out for another 4 to 5 games. And without him being on the floor for a sustained time, the Sixers franchise, to put it quite frankly, is doomed. So there's going to be a finger pointed, there's going to be someone blamed, and more likely than not, one of Nick Nurse or Daryl Morey is going to get fired, potentially both, in a potential cleaning of the house situation. And while that might not be fair with Embiid sideline due to his health, you can look at Nick Nurse and be like, well, my roster was supposed to be built around Joel Embiid. Paul George, Tyrese Maxey were supposed to be the complementary pieces and the role players of Kelly Oubre, Caleb Martin, and whatnot. We're supposed to help surround and complement Joel Embiid. Daryl Morey can basically say, I did my job. I recruited Paul George. I got him here. I drafted Tyrese Maxey. I drafted Jared McCain. You went out and gave Embiid this contract extension with these health questions lingering and these health problems potentially limiting the rest of his career. That was a risk. That was a big move to take. But the Sixers and Daryl Morey did it. They have to lay in their bed now. Now, when you're Josh Harris and the Philadelphia 76ers owner, who do you choose to blame? Because for a team, and you can say all you want about Josh Harris, and he might not be the best owner, but he does shell out money out of his pockets. Nick Nurse is one of the highest paid coaches in the league. Daryl Morey is one of the highest paid executives in the league. You have 3 players on max contract. This team's going well into the luxury tax as well. And just to put it quite frankly, he has done, I think, as an owner, a lot to help build a championship-level team and a championship-level contender. And he's not going to be happy with a team that, with all these good players, with all this money on this roster, not even making the playoffs. And once again, it's unfair potentially there with Joel Embiid, but somebody is going to have to catch the blame for this. And it looks like right now Daryl Morey could be the guy to catch that blame. In a recent podcast by Bill Simmons, and you can say what you want about Bill Simmons, people have a lot of opinions on him, but he's as plugged in as a podcaster, as a media guy, as there is in the NBA. He follows it closely, or as close as anyone in the NBA. And basically in his last podcast, he said there's been some Bob Myers Philly buzz. And Bob Myers, a longtime executive general manager of the Golden State Warriors during the Splash Brothers run, during that dynamic run that they had, Bill Simmons is basically saying in this podcast clip, he's hearing Bob Myers could potentially replace Daryl Morey in their Sixers front office. And as I talked about, fair or not, somebody is going to catch the blame, and Daryl Morey for being, he might even be the highest paid executive in the entire NBA. He's going to catch a lot of the blame and a lot of the flack. And I was in the camp, I was in the situation, and I think a lot of people were, it was like, Paul George might not be what he once was, but you have to go out and sign him. He is by far the best option that the Sixers team could have around Joel Embiid. And you can blame Paul George for some of his negative performance, but he was brought in to be, a 2 or a 3. And while he is on a max contract, it was presumed that Joel Embiid would be the guy, Tyrese Maxey probably the 2, and Paul George the 3rd option, and really help out with rebounding, assists, defending on the wing, but then also being able to score. And Daryl Morey, the whatever you want to call it, the final nail in the coffin for him could be this Paul George extension, just because at his age, he's not performing as what was expected. Only 17 points per game. And you can point to his max contract and be like, he has not been deserving of that. And that was the main Sixers kind of offseason move, the big move this offseason to get him in this franchise, get him on this Sixers team to be the missing kind of piece, the missing link for the Philadelphia 76ers going forward. So when you look at Paul George, he is kind of the main reason why that Daryl Morey could be on the way out, besides from Joel Embiid's health. And Bob Myers has connections with Josh Harris and the Washington Commanders franchise. Bob Myers has served as a consultant to Josh Harris and to the Commanders, and he already has this relationship there. So you look at the kind of ties within it right there. That could potentially be the main reason why he is connected to Philadelphia right now. And Bill Simmons, I don't think is just coming out and speaking about that as a prediction. This is a legit story, and this was on Crossing Broad earlier today article. Myers already works with Josh Harris as a consultant with the Commies, as we talked about. He was on an advisory council to help find their next head coach, and that has worked out pretty well as the Commanders are in the NFC Championship this weekend against Philadelphia. Now he might get back into the NBA once Daryl Morey or Nick Nurse are canned after this season from hell. But the author of this article, Kyle Pagan, basically touches on as well, and he's not an NBA credentialed writer or whatever, but he does have a good pulse on the Philadelphia sports scene, and I agree with his take here at the bottom. Now, I don't know how Bob Myers is going to make a constantly injured Joel Embiid and a 34-year-old Paul George work, but that's not my job. Hiring a three-time champion executive would definitely provide a shot in the arm for a fan base that needs it badly right now. Ticket prices are lower than the team's odds to make the playoffs. The Sixers, you can get basically any home game coming up for the get-in price of under $10. So pretty depressing state of affairs right now for Philadelphia and the Sixers. Bringing in Bob Myers, does that change everything? He would walk into a mess, a cluster where you have an old and aging Paul George on a max deal, potentially never healthy again Joel Embiid on a max deal. You got two really good young players in Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain that you're kind of banking on moving forward. And you turn back as well. Why would you get rid of Daryl Morey? Because he found Tyrese Maxey. He drafted him at around pick 20. He drafted Jared McCain, pick 17, pick 18, pick 16, somewhere in that ballpark. He's a very good drafter, a good talent evaluator. And I think he did his best job possible. Like, I don't necessarily agree that it would be on him because, once again, it comes back to Embiid not being healthy, but somebody's going to have to fall on the sword and catch the blame. Maybe it's Nick Nurse, but Daryl Morey could be the odd man out because of Josh Harris' connection with Bob Myers and Bob Myers' success, Bob Myers' titles with the Golden State Warriors. But you can also look at Bob Myers' run and recently and why he's out of a job. He didn't make the right draft picks down the stretch of this Warriors run to kind of extend that era of Steph, Clay, and Draymond. Sure, anyone can go out and sign Kevin Durant and make that work for a team, but he had a chance to kind of extend that championship window when he went and picked James Wiseman, Jonathan Kuminga, and Moses Moody with some of these top picks when there was a lot of other good players on the board available. So you can kind of look at it either side of the fence. Is this an upgrade? Is this a downgrade? Is this a lateral move? That's up for you to decide, but there certainly is a connection here and the possibility. But just to kind of wrap it up with what Bob Myers has done, and he's had a ton of success, obviously, at the NBA level with the Golden State Warriors. Won 3 NBA titles. You can kind of peruse through this little snippet from his wiki page, but he won 3 NBA titles, led the Warriors to a 67-15 record. Also was the GM for the team when they went 73-9. They obviously didn't win the title that year, wound up losing to the Cleveland Cavaliers, blowing the 3-1 lead. But this is a guy that's had his fair share of success, and he also was able to build kind of good rosters around the stars. Obviously, that team was about Kevin Durant, Stephen Curry, and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green as well, but guys like David West, Zaza Pachulia, JaVale McGee mentioned in this article, players like that really were able to kind of help build the roster, build up the team, and that's been the main kind of concern around Joel Embiid in his Sixers era, that it's been him and him only. And, there's been James Harden, there's been Ben Simmons, but outside of those guys, the role players haven't been good. And I feel really bad for Embiid and the Sixers and Morey and even Nick Nurse, because I think this is the best collection of role players that they've had around Joel Embiid. But he hasn't been able to be on the floor, and they haven't been able to have any sustained health together. So let us know in the comments below. Would you be a fan of bringing in Bob Myers? Obviously, there's a connection there. Would you get rid of Daryl Morey? Or do you say, wait another year, see if Joel Embiid is able to kind of rest and rehab for the rest of this year? It looks like this team won't be headed to the playoffs. There's no reason to rush him back anytime soon. And then do you run it back one more time with Paul George on that contract? Kelly Oubre, you can get him to opt into that player option. Tyrese Maxey obviously under contract. Jared McCain obviously under contract, and make kind of one more run at this. Or would you fire Nick Nurse potentially as well? Daryl Morey, do you fire both? Let me know in the comments below what you think, if you think Bob Myers would be a good fit as well, and this kind of pre-existing relationship and connection with the Sixers ownership. Let me know what you think, and as always, we'll be keeping it locked here on Sixers Digest. Tune in for tonight's game against the Cleveland Cavaliers and see if the Sixers are able to break this losing streak, but it's not likely against the number 1 team in the Eastern Conference.